Stefan Molyneux, aka Mr. Sparkle, except instead of being a light bulb meshed with a fish, it's a light bulb meshed with Frankenstein, is living up to his self-cultivated image by offering his 2 cents about the Australian election, which pretty much boils down to Labour communist, liberal free market, where he trashes the Labour Party and then proceeds to advocate for their policy positions for 8 minutes straight. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Stefan Molyneux, a being of pure logic.
Good job, Australia. It looks like you managed to defy the random wish fulfillment fantasy projections of the political polls of the last couple of years and vote yourself in what looks like it's going to be a majority Conservative government.
Deep thinker, coming to the same conclusions as those who read The Telegraph that was, yeah, I sure beat those elites by voting for how the elites wanted me to vote. I've been hearing this all week from idiots that, well, this cuck thinks the media is not biased towards Labour. They had them up in the polls, lol. And honestly, I don't know how you can possibly reason with someone who is that dense and oh, actually, yes I do, by using the analogy of footy. You know how Sportsbet gave favourable odds to the Roosters beating the Cowboys in the 2017 prelim? So you look at all the dunderheads at home going, go on. Because Sportsbet thought the Roosters were going to beat the Cowboys, does that mean that Sportsbet is biased towards the Roosters? In fact, let me ask you a simpler question. Do you know what the word biased means? Do you think the way that the media frames debates, or what debates they even allow to be televised, or what the themes that they decide the election is going to be about, would maybe possibly have more of an influence on shaping public opinion than announcing the results of a fucking poll? In other words, if you think media bias is the news reporting that Labor's in the lead, rather than the narrative they were pushing that was Labor's in the lead and here's why it's bad, then I have the perfect YouTuber for you, the Swedish or some shit. Whatever, the point is, he's not fucking Aussie. Stefan Molyneux, intellectual messiah to those who can't tell the difference between media bias and Sportsbet.
The great temptation here is to rest on your laurels and say, well, we did it. We have staved off the collectivist, leftist hysterical tide.
That's the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of Bill Shorten. Hysterical. Particularly rich coming from a man who explains the very simplistic point that when governments are in power, they pass laws as...
Here's the thing. When the left gets in power, they steadfastly use every conceivable legal, quasi-legal, hysterical, abusive, manipulative, you name it, methodology to push forward their agenda.
Not hysterical, particularly when the leftists he's referring to as the Australian Labor Party, who I'm almost certain he doesn't know the name of, that are so collectivist in their thinking that they got rid of the vast majority of trade tariffs in this country, floated the Aussie dollar, brought about the most rapid period of market deregulation in this nation's entire history. You know, that old chestnut straight out of the books of Karl Marx. Maybe I'm just not on the same intellectual wavelength as Brain Universe Stefan Molyneux, but I'm starting to suspect that maybe, just maybe, he's your run-of-the-mill political pundit who hashtag doesn't have an argument, and masks that by throwing around words like left, right, communist, fascist, Marxist, Pol Potist. Why the fuck not? Bill Shorten is a Pol Potist. To describe things he personally feels like he shouldn't like, but hasn't done any research into it, so feelings over facts? That's my hypothesis anyway, that he's an intellectual charlatan, though it is allayed by the fact that his display pictures of him doing this. I'm just saying that for somebody who claims that he's an empiricist, i.e. looks at the evidence to make up his mind, there was a serious lack of evidence in this video in that there wasn't a single piece of evidence in the entire 8 minutes. In fact, it took him almost a quarter of the way through the video to give up one reason for why he likes the Liberals, who I also think he forgot the name of as he keeps referring to them as the Conservative Party.
In pursuing your agenda, the agenda of conservatism, of small government, of free markets and so on.
Free markets and so on. How very empirical. I don't understand how he came to that conclusion. There's a source that he'd probably like, the Heritage Foundation, as he's been on Dave Rubin, wink wink, ranked Australia under Labor as being 3rd highest in the world for economic freedom, which, geez, if Stefan's right, they're a collectivist party, I wonder what that makes 4th in the world, Cuba? You know where they ranked the Liberals? Fifth, so far be it from me to question the ironclad reasoning of this man that looks like every Greek dude that owns a chicken shop, but I think a good on ya is in order, right back at you, Stefan, for purporting to believe in free markets and then backing the party that is almost half as good at delivering free markets. For supporting a party that spends over $12 billion of taxpayer money each and every year on propping up the fossil fuel industry, because nothing screams let the market decide than forced taxpayer subsidies, who dismisses the Labor Party as collectivist leftists, the party that opened up the banking sector in this country to foreign banks to compete with the Big Four's oligopoly. Good on you, Stefan, for backing the party that sabotaged the biggest free market expanding tool in this nation's history since the electric grid, the National Broadband Network, precisely because Rupert Murdoch and Telstra didn't want a free market. They wanted to control more of the communication networks in this country, and the Liberals said, well, we'd do anything for Telstra and Rupert, so those two combined, double yes. And proceeded to sabotage broadband in this country to the point that we have internet that is worse than countries where most roofs are made of straw. We actually have broadband that is worse than Kenya. How does that play into your racial IQ hierarchy, Stefan? Though as usual, Mr. Molyneux, very thought-provoking. I am learning things. I'm learning that you must be a huge board game enthusiast, as you seem to have muddled up the idea of a free market with monopoly. Either that, or because it's you, Stefan, I suspect that you're actually playing 4D chess, as you then go on to suggest,
If the left isn't screaming blue murder, well, you're not taking back any territory and you're just ceding inch by inch the liberties that your ancestors fought and bled and died to provide to you. So, couple of suggestions I have, of course, you need to get immigration right under control.
and the way he suggests we get immigration under control is by re-electing the party that doubled immigration in this country. I have to admit, my inferior brain is finding it hard to track the logic, but maybe he thinks that they have more to prove as a result. Either that, or he glimpsed from a single headline around election time because the Prime Minister that he is glad got in was singing the praises of a high immigration intake until there was an election. As opposed to the party that has been begging to reform visa applications in this country as the rich are using it to exploit cheap foreign labour. They are also proposing to increase the minimum wage of immigrants to $65,000 a year, making it more expensive for employers to hire immigrants than Australian workers, thus getting rid of the incentive for employers to hire foreign labour. Which I'm sure as an empiricist, he logically weighed up and thought, no, I'm a free market here. Well, that's what I concluded until I watched a minute more of your video, where you then mentioned the Chinese in, again, not hysterical terms at all.
But you also have the much more legal economic imperialism of, say, people from China buying up most of the continent.
The Chinese are buying up most of the continent. Jesus. Someone's been binging on one too many 2-minute-long Clive Palmer ads. I didn't know a little over $10 billion of investment a year in an economy that is worth trillions would buy up most of the continent. But granted, Chinese investment in this country is a concern. And guess which government it peaked under? Because I'm pretty sure people who frequently watch this channel would know. That's right. The Liberal government! God. The only good thing about another term of the Liberals, selling that sweet, sweet catchphrase merch, where he proposes that the way of dealing with Chinese influence is...
It's almost impossible for non-Chinese people to own property in China, so you just need to go to the Chinese and say, hey, you know the way that you guys run your society? That's not so bad. So what we're going to do is we're going to match your ownership capacities in China. We're not going to make it any easier for Chinese people to own property in Australia as it is for Australians to own property in China.
Sorry to let a bit of my inner Australian out, but what cunt? Let me get this straight. You're someone who believes in the free market until the free market does something you don't personally like, at which point you want restrictions placed on the free market. Well, now it at least makes sense why you like the Liberals. Stefan Molyneux, unapologetic free marketer until the free market does something that personally offends me, at which point I need a safe space. What an SJW cuck.
Now, another thing that you should do is you should not be able to come to the country and go on welfare.
See, let me put this in words you'd understand, Stefan. Not an argument. Both Labor and the Coalition have already struck a deal to pass legislation that would see migrants wait up to 4 years to access welfare payments such as New Start and concession cards. You may as well have just spent 2 minutes of your video arguing that George Costanza's catchphrase should have been George is getting upset. It is. You spend a quarter of the video making a point that is completely redundant, which actually fair's fair. That in itself is a redundant statement, as the entire video is completely redundant.
So you need a high IQ population.
High IQ population? Dude. You're talking about Australia. The closest thing we have to a public intellectual, the person that I most hear touted as "fuck that guy's fucking smart, isn't he?" is Sterlo.
So you need a high IQ population, a well-educated population, because then there's very few who are going to use the welfare state. Why?
So then why are you celebrating the return of a government that has seen our education ranking go lower than third world countries? We are worse than Kazakhstan now, Stefan. I wish that was a joke.
Because if you're smart, you get much more money in the free market than you ever would in the welfare state.
Yeah, intelligence is an indicator of how much money you make. Gee, I always thought the smartest people in society were scientists. Turns out I was wrong. Kerry-Ann Kenley dunks on them. In my observation, usually the people that get paid most in society are complete and utter leeches like investment bankers and consultants. Watch my video, Death of Science in Australia. The party you're advocating, because you love education so much, cut $3 billion out of science. They then gave $2 billion of that to consultants who sat there and went, yeah, I think that if you cut $3 billion from science and gave us $2 billion, you'd make $1 billion. I think you'll be happy to learn, Stefan, that logic has prevailed. He waffles on like this for another 3 minutes and then closes with this perler.
You'll be saving your entire culture and civilization. So yeah, people might get mad at you, but you're not on the baton death march. And remember, whenever you feel bad, at least you're still not an Australian prisoner of war under the Japanese of the Second World War.
Top stuff, suggesting that by voting for the Liberals you're doing the spirit of the Anzacs a solid. The men who wouldn't have died in the first place if the founder of the Liberal Party didn't sell the Japanese the very iron they fashioned into bullets to invade us with. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Stefan Molyneux, a being of pure logic. Like if you agree.
Please share and comment below. Comment.